with that, let's march ahead and invite our next keynote speaker, ladies and gentlemen. He, in fact, is the Group Vice President of Products with the Oracle Marketing Cloud, and he's a technology and product management expert, active participant in hackathons, and is also a 3-time winner at MasterCard, including Grand Global Prize there a couple of years ago. Also holds 24 patents issued to date, with more than 50 plus filed so far in the areas of personalization, payments, and search ranking. He's also the winner of the Yahoo Superstar Award, a Founders Award at Yahoo that was given to select few across the world. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure the accomplishments can go on and on, but we now have the time to hear from him on his fantastic insights. So please put your hands together to welcome on stage our next keynote speaker, Mr. Kaushal Kurapati.
All right, thanks. Thanks for the introduction. Namaste, Mumbai. Good morning. I'm really excited to share thoughts on AI and marketing today, and we'll do it in 3 acts. Before we get into that, I want to wake you all up with a bit of a quiz to start with, right? I'll put up a statement here on, this is an earthquake. It happened in California. Don't worry, it's not real life or anything. It's a news event, but how many of you do think that it was written by a human being, this particular statement? It's a news item. Any show of hands? How many of you think it's written by a machine? Okay, all right. That wasn't a trick question, I suppose. So let's go with another one. This is a Shakespearean sonnet, inspired by Shakespeare, of course, but how many of you think this is written by a machine? Few. Human being? More of you. Actually, this is a trick question. It was written in combination with a human and a machine. This is basically kind of the software that you all have on your smartphones, a Swift key kind of a software, which predicts what you will text next, right, based on your statistical patterns. And it was trained on Shakespearean sonnets, and it chose the words. A human being put it together into poetry form. Now, the last, not the least, Apple's holiday earnings, a news report and a financial news report from a few years ago. But again, written by a human. How many of you think? Okay. Machine? A lot more. This actually turns out to be written by a human. So, not to trick you guys all up, but the point is, you can't tell the difference these days. You really can't tell the difference a lot of times which news article is being written by a bot or a human being. That's where we are really in terms of AI, right? So we'll do this in 3 acts, right? The first one, I want to just give a brief, really tour on a marketing kind of a flashback. And then we'll talk about the second act is AI and where it is and applicability to different spheres of life. And the third, we'll just put them 2 together and see where AI and marketing are going together. So a long time ago, and I think marketing has been there forever, really, ever since human beings have basically started producing products, ideas, ideologies, you wanted to spread them. I think marketing in some form or shape has existed. You probably didn't call it marketing back then, but the principles of marketing have remained consistent and constant, I think. And I found this, which is a fascinating piece of history. It's a 4,000-year-old tablet. It's a cuneiform tablet. It was deciphered, luckily for us. And this is basically a customer complaint, apparently, by a merchant. He bought a earthen pot or a copper pot from somebody, and that wasn't up to quality, apparently, right? So he is demanding a refund, and he's claiming if he doesn't get a refund and proper respect, he will not buy again from that same merchant, right? So talk about customer service importance and the importance of driving loyalty and the whole customer life cycle journey, right? That's true 4,000 years ago, and I'm pretty sure most of you will agree in this room that it's true today. Right? And so what has changed? I mean, if some of these principles are really constant throughout time in history, I think what has changed is really the evolution of technology in a way and the changing consumer behavior. Right? If you think about right from printing press when it started, the modern industrial revolution, if you will, and there came along newspapers, coupons. I'm still fascinated that there are 330 billion coupons printed today, even today, in the US per year. And I didn't misspeak that. It is still that much of printing going on. And companies are throwing money at it when you know that people are basically, in the US at least, newspaper comes and it just goes into the recycle bin. It doesn't even see any human eye. It's different here, I know that. So we'll talk about that. Radio came along. Radio still demands a big share of the pie, actually. TV, of course, holds sway big time in terms of ad dollars. Then the first generation of internet, I would say, is sort of the browser. It's one of the first browsers around. And then smartphones, I think, changes the game a little bit more. I think of AI as sort of the next generation of it, the next evolution of it, because it really drives efficiency and effectiveness in your marketing. So a lot of these marketing channels, essentially, a lot of people say this, right? Half of my marketing dollars are wasted, I don't know which half. And over and over, with performance marketing, you've been getting a little bit more efficiency with search advertising, display advertising, you're tracking the clicks and everything, but it's not fully there. The attribution models are not fully there. And I've worked in attribution-based modeling and those as well, so I know that it's possible to link those two together. But with AI, I think that the effectiveness of it and the efficiency of it goes up much higher. A brief look at sort of how the spend happens in the US. It's an earth-shattering moment, I think, for me at least, in the sense of performance marketing, basically digital, if you can, has eclipsed TV for the first time, basically at the end of last year or this year. So that is really a strong, powerful statement on what attribution-based marketing or performance marketing is headed, where it's headed, right? And India is slightly different. TV's percentage is very similar, but of course India's print is holds sway, which is probably very unique for this market and probably in the world as well, many other places. But I think this pie will kind of shift and change as AI comes into the picture and turbocharges some channels versus a few other channels, right? So it'll be fascinating to see that picture in a few years. Now let's go to the second act. What's going on in the world of AI, right? Just a brief history of, because AI means different things to different people. And I think fundamentally the beginnings of AI began really with the beginning of computing itself. In World War II, when Alan Turing started creating computers to crack the Enigma code from Germans and so on, and in the United States as well, computers were sort of built first. Initially itself, people were thinking, saying, these computers can be made to behave like humans, and they should be. Turing himself created the famous Turing test, which is still used in AI, saying, if you can't tell the difference, like first we did the quiz, right? You couldn't tell the difference sometimes whether something that was written or something you're interacting with was with a human or written by a machine, then that passes the Turing test. And that's a gold standard for basically AI, even to today. What has changed? I mean, so AI, the term was coined in 1956 by a bunch of scientists who met at Dartmouth College in the summer. And so it's been promised for 60 years, really. What is changing now? I think there are three factors. One is the democratization of data. I think we saw from the previous speaker as well. The ton of data that's being generated is sort of stating the obvious. And it wasn't that way 5, 10 years ago, right? The second is, I think, the computing power. So computing power has become kind of cheaper and cheaper and easier to spin up with cloud-based solutions. And the last is AI algorithms themselves. They were now much more accessible. High school students are creating AI algorithms and essentially applying them to business problems. And that was not the case. I written algorithms before, and I used to write them from scratch. It was very hard to do it. But now a high school student can do it, really. And that has really unleashed the power of AI into various myriads of business applications. So we'll take a look at few applications of AI across various industries and then come to marketing, right, just to give you a flavor for it. In the field of medicine, I think it's quite fascinating what subtle select algorithms are able to do now. Skin cancer specialists usually look at skin lesions and then say whether someone has skin cancer or not. And computer algorithms now can look at, which are trained on 100,000 images of skin cancer, can be as good as a board-certified dermatologist. And just think about that. That's quite fun, quite phenomenal if you think about it, right? There will be a point in the near future where there would be maybe a doctor app in a smartphone, which would probably be just as good as, or better than going to a neighborhood doctor or a specialist for that matter. There's a fascinating project called the Human Diagnosis Project, which is putting together thousands of doctors' worth of their case histories and experience into one single machine, and it's making that machine more and more sort of better every day, right? So your neighborhood doctor, you may wonder whether he or she is keeping up to date with the latest in medical science, but if such an algorithm were to exist, then it's at the fingertips for everybody, just like Wikipedia is now. It's basically put an encyclopedia in everybody's fingertips. You could leverage the power of the world's best doctors in an app, for instance, right? I don't think it takes away a doctor per se, because a doctor still requires, I think, common sense, which I'll get to in a minute, which computers are really bad at still. So we'll talk about that. Chess, which has long been held as the pinnacle of human creativity, ingenuity, intelligence, and so on. Take a look at this chart. Computers have been basically beating humans at chess for the past almost 10 years, consistently, and by significant margin too. Okay, and there are like stellar examples of training algorithms from companies which have learned to play chess in one day ingesting all of human knowledge of chess and beating the best human that there is on record, right? But guess what happens if you ask that algorithm, what did it just play? Do you know what a board game is? It doesn't even know what a board game is. It doesn't know that it played chess. So there is task-specific intelligence that it can have, but it does not have general intelligence, what's called artificial general intelligence. And that's a very important distinction to hold. Machine translation, I'm really fascinated with this as well. It could bridge cultures, especially in a place like India where you travel a couple hundred miles and you end up with a totally different language. And there are real-time translation that's possible now where Chinese news or any news in a different language can be translated into another language with perfect accuracy, and you cannot tell the difference between if a machine did it or a human being did it. And there are, I think, some companies that are trying to sell earbuds which will translate it in real time, right? For any of you Star Trek fans, it's like fascinating. It's like the universal translator they used to have there. But things could be lost in translation. This is a kind of interesting thing. There's this episode that happened. There's a Palestinian guy who had posed along with this bulldozer and put this term up, Yusbihum. I'm sure I'm not saying it right. It's in Arabic, I believe. It's good morning, right? The translation software got it wrong. It said attack them, okay? Big mistake. So this guy was picked up by the Israeli security forces pretty quickly, and they're very efficient at that, I'm sure. And clearly he was questioned for a while. They luckily figured out that the translation software got it wrong, luckily for that guy actually, and he was let go. But it could have ended up pretty badly for him, right? And take a look at this. I did this sentence just before, as I was prepping for this talk, in a popular software, translate software, I won't say which one. I would like to ask you out on a date, right? And the Hindi translation for that says, "मैं आपको एक तारीख से पूछ सकता हूँ." For those of you who don't know Hindi, it's basically doing a literal translation of date, and did not, if a boy were to ask a girl, or vice versa, in the Hindi version of it, I'm pretty sure they're not going out on a date. Right? So things could get lost in translation. Just don't blindly, jump into AI. Just have a little bit of common sense to it. Writing. So writing has been obviously a domain we saw in the first some news articles which were fooled us as whether it's a human being wrote it or computer wrote it. Associated Press is using software from Wordsmith which basically will write most of financial news reports because it's a very templatized sort of story. right? Someone's reporting of earnings, or a sports score even. I hope, I'm a cricket fan, I hope that someone like Kaushal or Mohan is not replaced, but still, some of the routine ones can be replaced by bots, and you cannot tell the difference. But that said, there's interesting things happening in the world of writing novels. There's a guy a scientist called Sloan in University of California, Berkeley, who's trying to write a novel basically using a computer, with him and the computer together. He writes the sentence, the bison are gathered around the canyon, and he seeks help from a computer to complete that sentence, right? And the computer says, by the bare sky. It's not bad at all. It's not bad at all, right? He tries another one. The bison have been traveling for 2 years back and forth. It says between the main range and the city. It sounds a little weird. It was trained on whatever it is, so it gets weird like that, right? It could be off sometimes, like we saw in the translation example. This one is a Harry Potter fiction it's created, and this is there online, you can see it too. The first sentence of this is pretty okay. Leathery sheets of rain lashed at Harry's ghost as he walked across the grounds toward the castle. Sort of okay. Look at the last sentence though, that's about Ron. Ron saw Harry and immediately began to eat Hermione's family. It is pretty weird if for whichever fantasy novel it is. So it could throw up some pretty interesting things like this. But there are very interesting attempts being made to teach computers how to write stuff creatively, right? Self-driving cars, right? It's all the rage in automotive systems, companies and so on. All of you in this room will say that this is a stop sign. Will you agree to that? Right, pretty much. But scientists created this slightly defaced stop sign to see what the software thinks, and it saw it as speed limit 45. Imagine what would happen if two cars coming to a stop sign, one is self-driven, the other one assumes that the other car would stop, and it wouldn't. It could be fatal. So we've got to sort of eliminate a lot of these kinds of bugs and make it really foolproof. Last but not the least, algorithms are subject to human bias. Really, there was this ads that are being shown if you declared yourself as a woman that are not high-paying jobs, and that is shutting off a whole gender. I wouldn't want that to happen to my daughter. Or if you're training like smart speaker systems at home on a particular language accent, and if you speak as a different language or a different accent or a mixed language between, let's say, Hindi and English or Spanish and English, whatever it is, what happens? It doesn't recognize you properly. You're shut out of that technology. And the US criminal justice system uses an algorithm called Compass, which assesses criminals for their probability of repeat offense, and so that whether to award them parole or not. And it was proven that systematically that system essentially overestimates the probability for a particular race, saying that they're at a higher risk than what they actually are. So you could be systematizing a lot of these things, and that could seriously hurt big sections of the population. So with that as the background, let's last look at how marketing is getting transformed, right? And is it transforming at all? Why do I say that? I think it is getting transformed fundamentally because of the consumer behavior that's changing. If I counted the number of devices that are there at my house which are connected to the internet, and there are about 16 of them, and that doesn't count cameras that are also connected to the internet, right? So in the past few years itself, that has changed the way we all watch television, we all watch media or consume news or whatever the case may be. So if a marketer is not responding to that change in behavior, then they're losing us. So by the very fact that we have changed, we are forcing marketing to change. That's kind of fundamentally it. And you need to follow that data, essentially. Marketers are also changing. How many of you here who might be in the marketing field, beyond your traditional marketing mix, how many of you own like customer service or user experience in part of your portfolio? Anybody? I see a few hands raising up. Yes, I think. So we see a lot when we talk to customers. I see a lot of this happening. And that's because you need to own the entire customer journey. right? Every single interaction touch point is an opportunity for marketing. And you have to, it's just like that cuneiform tablet kind of thing, right? Customer service is so important for maintaining retention, loyalty, and all of those things. And that's been known for a while. The difference now is that you have the data, and you need to be able to pool that data together to act on it. At least I and my sister products in our division, we have put together portfolios of solutions where we're able to get all of this data together in one umbrella. Right? We announced something at Oracle Open World recently in San Francisco, where we're doing a customer experience, Unity is what we call it. We're trying to get a 360-degree sort of view of the customer under one umbrella, so that our customers can then take action on that sort of data that's coming together in one place. I think so far in Martech and AdTech, this is fundamentally the way it's done, meaning, and this is a recommender system at its heart, and since you did this, you will also likely do this. And if you look at you did this with any verb you can replace it with, whether you search for it, liked for it, bought it, subscribed to it, hated it, complained against it, clicked it, right? Any of them, you're likely to do this. So if you follow that paradigm, basically what you're doing is you're modeling consumer behavior, you're quantifying what is happening here, and you're predicting what will happen to the customer journey next. If you did a combination of this, then something else will happen, right? That's where this AI model is. This is the fundamental sort of premise today in all targeting systems, all Martech systems or AdTech systems. That's essentially there. And we operate in a lot of these, whether it's email orchestration or social cloud listening, all of those products, ours, look at all of these kind of behaviors and kind of estimate what what a customer or user is likely to do. I found this sort of survey as to what are all the areas of AI, marketing that are influenced by AI already, right? And to varying degrees, that's true. Fundamentally, if you take a step back from all of this, anything that can be quantified, anything that can be codified, is basically today subject to be influenced by a model. You can apply a math model on it, basically. And you'll be surprised that we've already seen it in chess, we've seen it in medicine, we've seen it in machine translation. So many things which are kind of fundamentally thought of as the realm of human beings is being shifted to algorithmic, so is being subjected to those algorithms essentially. We can quantify consumer behavior based on, like we saw in the previous slide, what are all the things that you click on, watch on, or buy, and things like that, behavior. You can target segmentation, you can do segmentation on it. You can figure out the right time to send a message. Our email orchestration systems, responses, and other both do that. I saw a report this morning internally for Thanksgiving Day emails from last week was Thanksgiving in the US, highest shopping period, and we sent more than 1 billion emails every day, basically. And that cannot happen. That's happening at scale, but it's happening also efficiently, right? It's about testing out the right templates, A/B testing. It's figuring out who to send what kind of content. It's personalizing it. It's also looking at the analytics after it comes back, right? And ultimately, we also look at things like sentiment and so on. And that takes me to the point of one particular thing which I thought was probably not subject to AI, but I was surprised to learn it is also, is emotion modeling, right? Human beings, it turns out, are, we feel first and then think later. So our brains operate in a way that it takes 1/5 the time for us to feel than to think. So that's 5 times faster in terms of feeling. So if you have an emotional connect between a brand and a consumer, that really drives loyalty. Studies have shown varying degrees of loyalty. 8 to 10x of loyalty is driven if someone has an emotional connect with a particular brand, right? And companies are using it in a very interesting way. Ironically, bots are the ones, or algorithms are the ones that are helping us figure out how we feel. One interesting study was, I think Disney's doing this, is they're looking at the facial expressions of people as they're watching a movie trailer, for instance, or a particular ad, and they're measuring millions of sort of expressions simultaneously, right? How people are reacting, whether they're laughing, smiling, you know, you have disgust, anger, whatever, frustration, or neutral kind of face, and depending on your demographic, they're then mapping it to essentially a library of emotions. So no longer are the days where asking people afterwards in a survey, saying, hey, did you like this trailer, did you like the movie, or and so on, and then figuring out a movie will be a hit or not. That still may be valid, you can still ask that, but they're going really granular and measuring millions of data points and then mapping it and saying, oh, this is how I can predict that it would be a success with this kind of demographic, and maybe we should market it that way to a particular demographic, right? So it's kind of very interesting in how, what are all the data points people are looking for that small competitive edge, essentially. So no realm of marketing is really kind of protected in that sense, right? The only thing that's protected, I think, is common sense. So computers don't have that yet, in the sense of, so don't go head to head with them in terms of a task that is number crunching. But like an example for this would be, let's say we showed a computer a picture of players playing cricket. I'm a cricket buff myself. So computers have gotten to the point they're pretty good now. They can tell that it's a picture where people are playing the sport cricket and not baseball or hockey or whatever it is. So they're good at that. So we can easily say that. But let's say we turn around and ask that same algorithm a simple question. Are they playing in a forest? Right? It's not a game-related question. So anybody here who doesn't know cricket, for instance, let's say, can also answer that question based on their common sense intelligence, saying, yes, they're not playing in a forest, they're playing in a stadium, a curated pitch, and so on. But a computer will completely stumble at that because it doesn't know what to do with that. It is based on general purpose intelligence. And there are a lot of efforts out there which are trying to teach computers general purpose intelligence, but they're still in the early stages, right? They're nowhere close. But that doesn't mean that this problem won't be solved or it won't get to the point where they will be good at it. There is US military, DARPA is invested in it. Paul Allen was the co-founder of Microsoft. He has an AI institute which is driving common sense intelligence-based research. OpenAI is doing that. So there's a lot of efforts that are going on in figuring out artificial general intelligence. And even the state-of-the-art systems, where you'll hear the terms like deep learning and things like that. Deep learning is also very task-specific. It can be very good at playing chess or building a Go algorithm, which is another board game, but it's not really good yet at the general purpose intelligence. So ultimately, marketing, I think, in a way, will get harder before it gets easier. The reason I say that is you will be swimming up basically a mountain of data suddenly because there's a deluge of it and there's like so many channels and so many avenues of data to pay attention to, but the solutions are not there yet in terms of piecing it all together easily. We're getting there, a lot of our solutions do that today, but it is not there it takes a whole organizational approach to understanding data, everybody rowing in the same direction, and being experimenters at it, right? Experimentation is something, I used to work in tech giants like Yahoo and other places I know, which we used to run hundreds of experiments pretty much every 2-3 weeks, every day, right? And we would figure out what's happening and then serve out the right consumer experience to the users. And a lot of our customers do. I run a platform today, which is an A/B testing platform called Maximizer, where we help retail services, financial clients, a lot of customers are doing experiments. But what we see them struggling with is really the culture of experimentation, getting to that, that thinking overall that data is important, to look at data, experiment something, test it out, and then serve it out to consumers. So ultimately what people need to become is, if you're familiar with the American TV series Mad Men, which used to be a fictional advertising executive in the 1960s on Madison Avenue in New York, from that kind of a culture, you need to become basically a math woman or man. So the point being, you need to think of data, which you never thought of before, probably in different ways, and your whole organization needs to think of it that way. So last but not the least, this whole presentation actually was created by a bot. Yeah? No, just kidding. We aren't there yet. Then I would have had it delivered by a bot too here. By come all the way. So what is interesting is I find that this statement by a guy called Roy Amara is not there unfortunately, but we tend to overestimate the effect of a technology in the short term. You think it'll do magic like tomorrow. But at the same time, we all underestimate what will happen in the future. Meaning 30 years out, there is no way, like for instance, GPS is a great example. They launched GPS satellites back in the 70s, 40 years ago. But they couldn't have predicted all the different ways that GPS is being used today and how critical it is to everyday life. Similarly, AI, I don't think even I or anybody, and Watson was one of the founders of IBM at one point, I think said, there's a worldwide market for 5 computers, right? So in hindsight, you can laugh about it, but clearly into the future, it's very hard to predict what AI will do in various walks of life. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that very engaging presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, while we have run out of time, but we still have time for 2 questions, 2 quick questions. So we'll start with you.
So, as far as my understanding is about ML and AI. So, ML is based on data. So, it works perfectly fine when there is a huge crunch of data, big data rather.
Yep.
Okay. So, how do I target the untapped audience? Okay. So, there are 2 types of audiences. I'm coming from a digital advertisement platform and ad serving platform we have. So there are 2 audiences groups if I broad level categorize. So untapped audience and tapped audience. So what is that control or sample data I should have to target the tapped audience? Okay, that is the first question. And the second question is, how do I cover the untapped audience also? If I don't have any data, is there any tweak that I can do in ML that can go and figure out what is the untapped audience and maybe prospect customers for me? Okay. So,
yeah, thank you. Thanks for that question. I think it's important to understand. It's a good question. When you mean untapped, I'm assuming you mean essentially unknown audience versus known audience, right? And unknown audiences, obviously, there is software. We also have, with the power of cookies and a lot of mapping technologies, ultimately you would have to map them to some kind of behavior. Right? Even unknown audiences, so-called unknown audiences, are leaving a digital trail. Right? So you would have to build upon data. So any fundamental thing for any machine learning algorithm, if you don't have the data, you do have to accumulate it. Right? And you do have to undertake a journey of mapping it to known handles, whether it's email or Twitter or social or any demographics variables. So there's a journey from sort of going from unknown to the known, and then using that data to work, applying machine learning on it. But even in an unknown case, if there's a digital trail in terms of if they're completely unknown in terms of you don't know anything about them, then that's tough to kind of go on. But you slowly chip away at that problem. And coming to the known ones, in usually the way the control, you have to carve out pieces of the data and figure out which ones should be sort of controlled and which ones. And we have, actually there's a lot of testing platforms which are experts in doing that, which will help you figure that out. Our platform Maximizer, for instance, does that day in and day out. It knows which parts to set aside so that you don't have to worry about that. We're taking the pain out of that for you guys. So there's software out there that can definitely help you, in fact, do that exact thing.
Any further questions, ladies and gentlemen? Nirmal, I believe there's a video as well that we'd like to
Sure.
play across. So let's have the video on the screen.
Oracle Cloud has enabled us to revolutionize the film industry. Modern blockbusters are incredibly complex projects made up of massive data files that need to be transferred between artists, editors, and graphic effects people, so they can all work together to make stunning, exciting, dramatic films. Processing all that data is a huge task. Using our technology, our customers can do this work far more quickly. What Oracle Cloud enables us to do is deliver those renders faster than ever before, so rather than taking months, it can simply take days. Other industries have seen what we've been doing for film and are now asking if we can help them too. We're hugely excited about what's coming next, and it's all possible because of Oracle Cloud.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, can we have a huge round of applause?